Senator Bernie Sanders is trying to rewrite history, but we are not going to let him get away with that. Here's what happened. Bernie Sanders was asked this weekend if America is ready for a socialist president. And Bernie, as out of touch as ever with the American people who do not want socialism, Bernie said yes. Watch.
I think the answer is yes, but I think it's important for the American people to understand what my definition is of democratic socialism. It's certainly not how Donald Trump defines it. I've spent my whole life fighting for democracy, fighting against authoritarianism, whether it was in the Soviet Union, Venezuela, or any place else.
I've spent my whole life fighting against authoritarianism, whether it was in the Soviet Union or Venezuela or any place else. That is fake news. Bernie Sanders literally honeymooned in Soviet Russia in 1988. And then he praised the socialist social programs there. That is not fighting against authoritarianism. And you want to know the truth about Bernie in Venezuela? Bernie Sanders posted an article on his official Senate website that says Venezuela is living the American dream better than America. That article, you can see it on the screen, is still up on Bernie Sanders' website to this day. Literally, showers are now a luxury in Venezuela thanks to socialism. If there's one pattern of behavior in Bernie's, 165 years in Congress, it's the fact that he pals around with authoritarian regimes and ideas and ideologies. For example, Bernie once said bread lines in communist countries are a good thing. Watch.
Sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing. In other countries, people don't line up for food. The rich get the food and the poor starve to death.
In 1985, Bernie Sanders also praised the communist Castro regime in Cuba and admitted on camera that he traveled to communist Nicaragua to advise the communist Ortega regime on how to sell communist ideas to the United States. Take a look.
You may recall way back in, 1961, they invaded Cuba. And everybody was totally convinced that Castro was the worst guy in the world, that all the Cuban people were going to rise up in rebellion against Fidel Castro. They had forgot that he educated their kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society.
How do you find the sincerity of Sandinista leaders?
I was impressed. I was impressed by Father Descoto because he is a very gentle, very loving man. Ortega is an impressive guy.
Did you have suggestions for them how they could organize their PR a little bit more effectively?
I think it's yes. The point that I try to make to many of the people that I spoke to is they're getting killed in the American media.
That is not fighting against authoritarianism. In 1980, Bernie Sanders was an elector of the Socialist Workers' Party, which was founded on the principles of Leon Trotsky. This socialist party called for solidarity with revolutionary regimes in Iran, Grenada, Nicaragua, and Cuba, and wanted to abolish the U.S. military budget entirely. That is not fighting against authoritarianism. And Bernie Sanders, to this day, has never disavowed any of this. Bernie Sanders claims that his definition of democratic socialism is certainly not how Donald Trump defines it. Well, that's for darn sure, because President Trump and most Americans define authoritarianism as a government depriving private citizens of their rights. And Bernie Sanders wants that form of authoritarian government here in the United States. Bernie says he wants to bring a healthcare system like Canada or the UK here to the United States. Do you want to talk about authoritarianism? Do you want healthcare like Canada, where a father of a teenage girl has been threatened by the government with prison time if he calls his daughter by female pronouns, because she wants to be a boy instead? Do you want healthcare like the UK, where babies like Charlie Gard and Alfie Evans were forced to die against the wishes of their parents because of authoritarian dictates by the government? Bernie Sanders is lying about his past because he's desperate for your vote. So he resorts to lying because that's what authoritarian politicians do. Don't fall for it. And that is my final point.